Hey guys, Zelensky here because apparently I look like him, and I'm talking about War Thunder again. This is a follow-up to my War Thunder review where I kind of brushed off Naval. After getting some comments about it, I decided I should really give it a try. So to try and get a better picture of the Naval experience, I decided that I'd play 20 hours free to play as the British and 10 hours with an American premium top tier ship. For this, I bought the USS Arkansas, which was a relatively new battleship at the time. It was also like $90, so I'd appreciate if you could leave a like or comment on this video if you like it, because now I'm living on instant ramen. But what are my thoughts after over 30 hours of sailing? Well, to start off, I can sort of see why people like it. Like the rest of War Thunder, it has its satisfying moments. Like when you launch some torpedoes towards the enemy spawn and get a cheeky kill 5 minutes later, or landing a perfect salvo on an enemy ship and just seeing fires erupt all over it. I definitely had more fun than I was expecting, but I do think that Naval struggles because it's less friendly and appealing to newcomers. But getting into that is going to require a quick explanation of how Naval works. For those of you who haven't played Naval before, the arcade and realistic modes function basically the same as ground battles, except you're in big ass honkin' boats, with your goal being to capture a set of objective points on the map, or just kill enough of the enemy team. Like in other modes, arcade makes ship movement a lot quicker and helps you aim by giving you an indicator of where the ship you're targeting is going to be. This isn't a precise indicator, it's updated periodically over time, usually every 10 to 15 seconds, and I'm pretty sure it updates faster depending on how close your target is. The range your guns are shooting to also automatically increases as you move your mouse, whereas in realistic you need to adjust it manually. I almost entirely stuck to playing arcade because I personally just found the realistic aiming to not be fun. Like, learning to lead your shots in realistic air or ground isn't that bad. You shoot and usually within less than like a second you know whether you missed or not. But in Naval, you typically engage with enemies over long ranges, like over 4 kilometers, so it can often take you 5 to 10 seconds or even more to see where your shots land, especially over really long ranges. Because of this, I found that leading my shots without the indicator to give me something to work off of was frustrating, since you have so many variables to take into account, like the travel time of your shots, the motion of your ship and the enemy's ship, and whether or not they're changing direction or speed, to name a few. I'm sure that people in the comments are going to explain why it's actually easy, but it definitely is way less intuitive than aiming and leading your shots in air or ground. And this is probably something that causes a lot of players to bounce off of Naval. When an experienced player decides to try it, they probably assume that realistic is the best way to play, like in other modes, but get turned off when they're confronted by the complexity of aiming in this mode. So if you're going to try Naval, I really recommend that you start with arcade. There's also this weird dichotomy between blue water and the coastal ship research trees. Blue water ships are things that need deeper water like cruisers, destroyers, and battleships, while coastal ships are smaller and range from PT boats to frigates. Now I understand that these are different classes of ship, but I don't really see why these trees should be separate. I mean, both types of ship take part in the same matches after all. It's kind of like how helicopters have a separate tree and ground, except bad. There isn't an incentive to grind coastal ships to aid in blue water battles because things are super imbalanced towards blue water ships, which generally blow coastal craft out of the water with ease. Aside from a few good coastal ships like the SKR-7, coastal ships are like annoying little pests to blue water ships that only get kills with a lucky torpedo every once in a while. And it doesn't really help that coastal ships are just super uninspiring. Like, what do you want to play as? This dinky little boat with 2 torpedoes and maybe a small cannon, or this ship with 4 torpedoes and 6 huge main cannons? And the gameplay of the smaller coastal craft, launching 2 torpedoes then hiding behind a rock for a minute while they reload, just isn't that fun and is obviously going to turn a lot of players like myself off from grinding coastal ships at all. After all, why should players spend tens of hours grinding through mediocre vehicles just to get to something which holds up to the reserve vehicles in the blue water research tree? I think that Gaijin should consider combining the naval trees and just make coastal into a different research line, with reserve ships at the same places they are now so that you can choose whether you want to start at blue water or coastal. That way you could use blue water ships to grind through the boring coastal ones to get to some of the okay frigates. I mean, it's not a perfect solution, but I think this would make it easier for people to justify spending time researching coastal craft, unlike now where most people barely bother with coastal from what I can see. The mode also has some weaknesses that I think are just kind of inherent to a ship-based game. First off, obviously, everything is a lot slower than the other modes. Yeah, that's a 30-second reload time. I hope you have a second monitor, cause having something to listen to in the background helps even more in Naval than in Air RB, especially if you're using battleships. Even when you're fighting with other ships, things can be pretty tedious. Fights tend to last longer because 1, you can't aim for specific components with the accuracy that you can in ground RB, at least at mid to long ranges. And 2, because ships are way more survivable. Landing critical hits on major components usually isn't enough to take a ship out of action, and they can usually still keep firing while repairing the damage. The most surefire way to take out a ship, besides getting a hit on the ammo storage, is to slowly kill off the crew. It's not uncommon to trade blows with enemy ships for like 3 to 4 minutes at a time, especially at longer ranges. And because of this and how much time blue water ships take to get anywhere, matches tend to last longer, and it's not uncommon to actually run down the clock. This isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but it definitely makes the appeal less broad. While slower paced gameplay can be a vibe, I should know I play truck sims, it's probably not what most players are expecting since ground and air RB tend to be pretty fast paced. Another weakness is that I think for the general audience, ships just aren't as sexy as tanks and planes. Ships have way less visual identity than tanks or planes do, and what I mean by this is that different ships feel and look really similar. And okay, I know there are like 30 different Sherman variants in the game, but in ground and air you can have pretty noticeable upgrades and different playstyles between tiers. Like in ground you have certain tiers where armor is really strong, but then in the space of 2 or 3 battle ratings, APFSDS and ATGMs get added, and suddenly armor isn't as important as mobility. And of course with aircraft you get the shift from prop planes to jets and from guns to missiles. But having played low, mid, and high tier naval, I don't really feel like the gameplay changes nearly as much. Besides the one time I encountered an enemy ship that had missiles, playing high tier feels pretty much the same as low tier, just with bigger and slower ships that have more guns. And with ground you also have meme tanks like the Mouse, the Sturm Tiger, or the recently added Pancake tank, which just add a lot of character and variety to the game. Meanwhile, I find that ships just kind of all look and play generally the same. While I can instantly tell the difference between a Sherman, a Tiger, or a T-34, when it comes to ships, if it wasn't for the game telling me what they were, I'd have no idea what I'm looking at. You might think this is nitpicking, but I think that the familiarity you develop with your vehicles and the enemy vehicles that you have trouble fighting makes you a lot more invested in the game. Like, if I keep getting killed by a certain tank which is playing in a way that I'm not used to, I want to learn how to fight it better, like learning where its weak spots are. For example, as a German main, M18s were the bane of my existence at one point, but now I'm a lot more aware of the paths they tend to take. But after 30 hours of playing naval, I can't even name a single ship that stood out to me besides the SKR-7, because it's just blatantly OP. Killing or getting killed by one ship feels almost identical to killing or being killed by another one, with the only real noticeable difference being in the class of ship that you're fighting. I've really tried to appreciate the ships, but I think this is just something where if you get it, you just get it, man. It's like those dudes who are into trains. I'll never understand why a certain engine gives them a full chub. Now, I know I've been ragging on naval a lot here, but like I said before, there are things that I enjoy about it, like aircraft being weaker than a wet paper bag carrying 6 bottles of wine. Seeing my AA turrets shred CAS faster than a Discord mod's resume never ceases to fill me with joy. Or the guilty pleasure of one of your teammates just eating a whole barrage of torpedoes instead of you. Oh, and everything you've heard about naval being a dummy thick SL grinder is absolutely true. Just look at this dog. I earned over 250,000 SL from one game of arcade, without premium, although I was using a premium ship. You know that whenever I get a big SL grinder, I'm hopping right into naval, cause 100% of the time I'll earn more than I ever could in air or ground. But other than when I get those, now that I'm done this video, I don't expect to be playing much of it. I think that combined with the problems I've outlined, it really just isn't my speed. But I do feel good about giving naval a solid try and forming a more nuanced opinion of it. So if you're in any way interested in naval, I'd say give it a shot, except maybe don't jump on buying a $90 battleship right away. Anyways, a big thanks to all those who watch these videos for some reason. I read all the comments, so let me know if my takes were based or cringe. More videos to come, even though I have a dogshit upload schedule. See you on the next one.
Slava Ukraini!